Good morning, everyone. My name is Malini Ghosal, and I'm an electrical engineer, and I work at Pacific Northwest National Lab as a power systems research engineer. And I'm really thankful for University of Wisconsin River Falls, and especially my friend and ex-colleague, Ronald Anderson, for this wonderful opportunity today. And today I'll be talking about the electric grid and its role in this clean energy transition. So what I'm really excited about today's talk is that I'm given this unique opportunity to interact with and share my passion for electrical engineering and the grid with people who have a different background than mine and probably have expertise in something else other than electrical engineering. So if I do it right, I may end up sharing some knowledge about my expertise and get you all excited about grid research and its role in clean energy transition. So, okay, let's get started. Okay, obviously, it's not moving. Okay. So, this is going to be the overview of my talk. So I'll start out with some introduction, like the clean energy transition in general and the role of decarbonization of the grid in this transition. Then I'll spend a considerable amount of the time in giving you some of the key knowledge about the grid, like some basics, what the grid is, some key concepts, and I'll try to link those concepts with where the clean energy transition challenges lie, so that you can kind of connect the dots and where it fits in the overall scheme of things. And then I'll spend a little bit of time describing some of the projects we do. Like I have 2 or 3 in this slide deck, but depending on time, I might just discuss 1 or 2 or all of them. So I'll just get to my next slide, which is a little bit about my journey. So I grew up in this Eastern Indian small town called Shiliguri. It's at the foothills of the Himalayas. It's a beautiful town, and it's famous for its teas and tourism and like lots of trading with neighboring countries. It's very uniquely situated town. And I finished my high school undergrad, everything in India, and I worked there for 2 years as a power systems engineer, and then I moved to Lubbock, Texas for my master's and Ph.D. And after finishing that, I moved to this rural-ish town in Eastern Washington, in Richland, Washington, in the state of Washington. It's 3 hours away from Seattle, but that's where our lab's main presence is. And there are some other presence as well. For example, we have a Seattle office, a Portland office, and some DC presence. So just a little bit of overview. PNNL is one of the 17 DOE mission labs, and we primarily serve DOE's mission. For example, we are really renowned for our battery chemistry research, our contribution in a lot of national security. And we are one of the early thought leaders for the concept of the smart grid. So if you trace back the origin of smart grid, one of our senior researchers kind of were one of the thought leaders. And speaking of national security, you have all come across this scanning device at the airport when you have to, hold your hand up, as we jokingly call it, the PNNL salute. So that also has some PNNL root. It's a PNL invention. And speaking of national security and airport security, so PNL also has this new airport screening tech where you can keep your shoes on while it scans. So, and recently covered in this show. So, little fun fact here. Next, just some numbers, just to get an idea. We have around 5,000-ish employees, and every year we have around 265 inventions and 88 patents. And annual spending hovers around a little over $1 billion. And these figures are from 2 years back, so they have changed a bit. Next, I'll just get started and dive in with the real presentation. So, what are the climate change scenarios? Like, where are we heading and where we need to be in terms of the climate change models and emissions? So this figure on the left-hand axis, there is this rate of change of emission per year. And on the right-hand side axis, we have this temperature increase from the pre-industrial period. And these trajectories correspond to different climate change scenario models. For example, if we do just the way we are doing with some minimal changes, we are probably going to be in the red region, which corresponds to around 5.5 degrees Celsius of increase. But what we plan to do is this reach this Paris range, which is limiting everything by 1.5 degrees Celsius. As you can see, it's a steep trajectory, like it's a major shift. So it's probably not going to be easy, but we have to get there, and it has a lot of challenges. So if you look at the clean energy transition, it has like a lot of pillars, really. Like it has like a lot of pieces needs to work hand in hand for this transition. Like we need government, lots of economics involved, technology, innovation, transportation, material science, a lot of different things. But what's really interesting is a major chunk of the responsibility lies in really in the shoulders of the electric grid, because that's kind of hosting, transmitting, and using the major part of the energy. And another important change that's coming, we all know, is transportations. With the electrification of transportation can account for the 15 to 30% of the electric load by 2050. So that's also a major shift we should be aware of. So these are the two key points I'm going to touch into this presentation. So now talking about grid's role in this clean energy transition, and what it boils down to is decarbonization of the grid. We all know what that is, but just as a overview, so how to read this figures is that each block represents 3 years of scenario. Like this is almost, the recent past, last year, and this is 2050. We'll just focus on the first one and the last one. And the left side of the graph represents the generation mix, like if it's fossil fuel or zero carbon or solar and other things. And the right-hand side represent the end user, the end user, like who's consuming it in which sector. So as we can see, like we have to go from here to here. So what are the major changes? First, the demand is going to increase significantly. So it's not just change in composition and other things, it's already a huge change in demand. On the top of that, we have to just get rid of this chunk of fossil fuel generation mix from 2020 to 2050. So that's a huge change, and it has to happen, but it also has to happen right. I know there are like a lot of impatience around clean energy transition, and I just came up with really dark humor on LinkedIn the other day. The source is Reddit, but yeah, but the truth is it's not super easy, but we have to do it as well. So anyway, moving on to the grid primer section of the talk, and feel free to post any question on the chat that I can address, and also feel free to unmute and ask towards the end of the presentation. So what's the electric grid anyway? I mean, I didn't know what the grid is when I was in, for example, high school, or I only learned about it more when I was doing my electrical engineering. So just a primer, it's actually the biggest machine on Earth. So it's like the huge interconnected system of wires, cables, generators, motors, lots of other things that basically keeps our lights on. And North American power grid consists of like 4 interconnections. So these are kind of like interconnection of their own, so they're not like really always connected, but that's the whole North American grid, and it's huge, and you can understand it has its complexities and challenges. These are the components of the grid, generally speaking. So the major generation happens on this like really huge generating units. It can be hydro, there can be other steam turbines, thermal power plants, nuclear, and other things. And those are generated usually in the medium voltage. Then they're stepped up on really high voltage and transported through miles of this transmission lines. I'm sure you all have seen these huge towers when you took a road trip or such, and then they're brought down to our local like population center, and then it's stepped down to a safer voltage level and distributed at our homes and other things. So that's the overall structure. And what's changing with clean energy transition is that generation is not always confined in this, this side of the place. It can be any other place, as any place actually, and can be at our homes as well now. But yeah, overall the structure is still the same. Now I'll talk about some key electrical engineering concepts, so that we'll start from the basics so that you can understand the challenges better, because the devil is always in the detail. So if you don't get what those are, you'll probably never be clear about like why do we care. So these are the 3 topics I want to talk. Just it could be just some of you have like sounds background, so you probably know, but just recap. So we all know that we use this alternating current that moves sinusoidally, but why? Like where it comes from? Just a little brief overview. So to answer that, we have even to go back, like how electricity is generated. And for that, it starts with a very interesting phenomena in the nature. It's called electromagnetic induction and other induction. And what it says is, if there is a like changing magnetic field, then it induces current in a closed wire. So if a ring or something like that, and if a magnetic field that's changing, so the change is important. If you have just a magnet, it won't work. You have to change its field. So how do you change its field? By using motion. And what motion is then like kind of like convenient, really, like so I was talking about this phenomena of electricity generated using moving a magnet around electric wire like this. So, and relating it to why we have an AC. So why we have it, because if you need to involve a movement to change this magnetic field, what's the most convenient movement? So it's usually moving in circles, moving in rounds, so that it saves time and other things and keeps the magnetic field uh, convenient for many reasons. So bottom line, why we have AC is because you have to move a magnet, and moving magnet in circles, that's most convenient. And just to give an idea, if you move something in circular motion, the current that's induced here is kind of like the shadow of this moving arrow on this line. And if you take the length of this shadow, with time, it varies as a sine curve. So just some basics. Now you know that why the AC machines were even invented, and why this is related with clean energy transition and its challenge, because so now every appliance and everything is designed in the grid because it expects a smooth sinusoidal wave as an input. But we know, like the renewable energies, for example, the solar PV, it's a different technology. It generates electricity from photon, so it doesn't provide something like sinusoidal. And for wind, it also depends on wind speed, so you cannot move it in this controlled fashion always. So that's going to disrupt the waveform, really. And another thing also I would like to mention is that the traditional generating units, those are, as you can imagine, those are like heavy, big equipments, and you use steam. You generate steam and move the turbine to generate this circular motion. So those are like really heavy machines. So they're very stable in a way. If there is an external perturbation, if there is a way, like some little perturbation, they can prevent that. So it's just like if you try to move a heavy thing, if there's a little disturbance, it doesn't matter, like it's pretty stable in a way. So that's why all these traditional generating units are really stable. If they're designed properly, they'll keep on giving this steady sinusoidal, which is really nice and of course cool. But with this changing scenario, all this heavy mass is getting replaced with this really intermittent renewable generator. So that's also giving rise to really a lot of like issues related to stability and other power quality, as we call it, issues. So it's so that's kind of the crux of the one of the challenges that electrical engineers are facing and researching for quite a few decades to address. And so now you know, like why this intermittent renewable energies pose a problem. So next, this is a bonus concept. I don't know any of you know this. Probably a lot of you have heard that our electrical current or the power is a three-phase thing. So wait, what's a three-phase? Why do you have three-phase? Why not four? Why three? So just a 2-minute overview. So this is the coil from top, and this is the magnet. So if you have an arrangement like this, you get just one single phase, and the same magnet moves, you just get one phase, one sine curve. But if you have two coils separated by 90 degrees, then you get two phase. But what engineers have discovered is if you have like three coils separated by 60, in this arrangement, then they generate this three phase, like three sinusoids, little shifted, because this wire is hitting the peak of magnetic field little bit later, so it peaks a little bit later. So three phase, and this arrangement, you can transmit like more power with less copper. It's much smoother and other things. So it's basically an engineering thing. This turns out to be very convenient. So that's why we have like three phase power generation. But we don't get three phase, like our appliances, they just run on single phase. You just wire it, it just runs. So what happens is, when it comes to your distribution system, the local utility or whoever wires things up balances all the three phases. So with the engineering judgment, user behavior, they just connect things such a way that they're always drawing more or less equal energy. So basically the bottom line is all the three phases needs to be balanced. And why this is important? This is important because now we have EVs, and EVs are not static. So you have this like really moving batteries moving around and going everywhere. So that's another challenge. How do you balance? How do you manage things at the distribution level? So now you know about this kind of another interesting concept, why things are three phase, and what's the clean energy transition problem. Again, moving on to the next one. Really quick, why we have like the high voltage lines, like why I would like step it up and then step it down. That's another like more of an engineering answer. The answer is, if you have to take transport power from over a really long distance, if you increase the voltage level, you can transport them more efficiently because the losses are much less. So that's the reason. And why this is important for your clean energy transition, because if you remember the curve, like we have to generate much more electricity and they have to be clean, and all those clean energies are at different part of the country, which not necessarily the population center. So we have to also build a lot of transmissions line. But when and where? So these are really crucial questions. If you have come up with a suboptimal solution or suboptimal planning, that might increase a lot of your cost. So yeah, so all these questions are important, and these are we are addressing. So we are currently performing a study where we are studying for a 2050 scenario. If we go all renewable or 80% renewable, for all these scenarios, we are trying to see where to build the transmission line, what's the most cost effective, but also secure. You cannot have just the bare minimum thing. Like if you line strip, you can still run it. So now you know this concept and what's the clean energy transition issue. Next, this is a very important key concept, and it leads to two of the projects I plan to talk about today. This is like how power is balanced. And wait, why do you have to balance this power? So remember that electrical energy, that's a just-in-time product. So if you generate it, you have to consume it right away. Yes, there are batteries, but we yet don't have grid scale batteries that can store things long term. And we are talking about like gigawatts of power. So that's yet not feasible. That's another clean energy transition issue that the whole world is working on. But we still have to balance majority of the power instantly. And how that's done? Well, that's done in this like market operators or balancing agencies by doing it real time. So how this happens is, for example, these are the balancing areas in the Western interconnect. And how it's done is that, so this is just an easy example. I probably don't have time to explain it super elaborately, but what I want to point out, so here it's a simplified grid. You have just 2 generators and 2 demand nodes. So if this demand node has certain demand, how do you dispatch these generators? Like, where do you draw and what amount of power? Well, that's like a super large techno-economic question, because, and what does it depend on? It depends on this distribution of this node, of course, like this distribution of this demand. So this distribution would be different if this was 60 and this was 70. Why? Because their circuitry is different and their limitations are different. And it's also a lot of economics involved, because the unit price of the cost of generating electricity at these generators also depend on the total energy that's being purchased. So all these generators submit all these cost curves every day and every hour, and the operators or the market operators, they project the demand, and it's like a real-time, like kind of a share market that takes every day, always, every hour. And then they run some complex optimization based on their submitted bids and based on the physical limits of the lines at that time, depending on weather, a lot of other things. And then they come up with a conclusion. Okay, you give me this much of energy, you give me this much of energy, and we can draw this much of energy from this generator, because although it's far, but it's cheaper for this particular combination. So just to give an idea, it's a like very interesting problem. And I know some of you have economics and background. So yeah, if you want to learn more, you can always dig deeper. So that's I want to talk about. And next, I'll move on to just to give a brief overview of some of the projects I'm working on, and that would come from here. Yeah, so the first topic I would like to talk about is how the balancing is done when you have too much renewable. Because if you're renewable, you cannot project how much they're going to generate and how much they're going to offset the demand. So estimating that, projecting that, and that's an important project. And if you recall, the previous problem we stated, that's done an hour ahead usually, or sometimes can be a different time frame, but usually an hour ahead. So what about the real-time adjustment? And why do we even need that? That's because we cannot instantly turn on, for example, a thermal plant or a nuclear plant or other plants. So you have to plan ahead and let them ahead know earlier. And so that's why you need to plan ahead, and that's why you need to forecast, but your forecast might not match with the real-time needs. And it's even true when you have renewables. So how do you prepare? So you match you do the real-time adjustments using some of your special units, which are like super quick start units, for example, hydro and such. And so it's important to know, like for a renewable heavy future, how do you will you have enough reserve, like quick start generating unit, like, and also it's very different from hour to hour. So how can you plan hour to hour reserve for your system? And currently how it works is they just assume a fixed percentage of the net load, like, we'll always keep 3% of the reserve, like 3% of the net load to be fluctuating, and we'll keep that certain amount of units ready. But that doesn't work anymore. When you have like lot of renewable, that varies from hour to hour, and they can vary significantly. So at PNNL, we came up with this methodology to handle that, and it's more of a planning tool. So we don't do it more of for operation for your next day. So we just give an estimate. Okay, for your 2035 scenario, we will help you determine what's going to be your reserve requirement. For example, if they know, okay, these are going to be the new solar sites and new wind site, and we look at the 2050 scenario of the projected demand, then also we have our weather forecast partners, and we like study what's going to be the typical forecast error and the mix of renewables and mix of the net load at each hour, then do our statistical analysis to give an estimate of like what's going to be the reserve requirement from hour to hour. So that's one project, just to give you a flavor of what we do here. I want to highlight that this problem may sound intimidating a lot, but the method is pretty straightforward, because how much balancing reserve you need is basically a function of your forecast error. If you could forecast perfectly, you could predict it perfectly, and you would not need any imbalance market or reserve. But if you can study the forecast error, its statistical characteristics, it's not too bad. So that's what we're doing. So instead of going 3% of not net load, now we are giving a more informed like tool to the market operators. And this tool has been adopted in the CAISO, like California, in a lot of Central American countries, and recently we're working with in Southeast Asia, like Vietnam and other countries, to give them this technology. Yeah, the next one I'll briefly touch is that this is a study we recently did, like the Western Interconnect, can it host like all the EVs, like if they're like rapid electrification of transportation, can it host? And like, even if it can host, what's going to be the generation mix? Remember the optimal power flow problem I discussed? Like, if you draw extra energy, it's going to change how optimally you kind of dispatch or allocate the generator. So it may happen that if to draw like charge new car, you have to get power from you have to dispatch a coal plant, because that's, for some strange reason, that's going to be cheaper at that point. So all this analysis needs to be done. So how fuel mix is it's going to be dirtier if it has to serve all those loads. So all these questions that needs to be addressed, and that's what we did. And trust me, it's I have the slides, so you'll get an idea what we did. So first was, we have to determine how many EVs going to be. So we started with some source that EPRI published, and we looked at this 28 numbers. And this is their like high predictions. So we went with the heavy electrification scenario, and then this is a nationwide number, and then we adopted it for like all balancing area wise number by using a combination of things, like the current trade in EV adoption already. So we get that from registration numbers and other things. So yeah, that's how we converted this nationwide number assumption to balancing area level numbers. For the other type of vehicles, like the medium duty vehicles and heavy duty vehicles, we used some other sources, reliable sources. We also talked to a lot of stakeholders for that. And then we came up with this nationwide number, then balancing area level numbers. And then we have to come up with a time varying load, because recall the first problem, it depends on the load demand at each node, and it's time varying. So for all the snapshot of time, we need to know the loads distribution and also the corresponding cost curve of all the generation mix, dispatchable generation mix. So we need all the demand side of profile. So for creating this, we came up with this charging profile. We extensively studied, we used our models for that and came up with this additional transportation load. And then we topped it on the projected demands from the other sources like buildings and other things, and ran the simulation to get that optimal power flow thing to run and analyze results. So what's our observation? The first one is, with rapid growth in EV, do we have enough resources or not? So is there enough generation? The answer is yes. For 2028, we are good in that sense. But how is the fuel mix going to be impacted? Well, so what we've found is that to serve the new EV load, we have to dispatch a lot of natural gas units, which is not bad actually. And the third one is, like, are there any issues regarding the distribution system as well? So we saw that there could be some voltage regulation issues for very fast charging, but anyway, let's focus on the other things. Another interesting observation we saw that if we don't employ any charging strategy, then it will stress the grid by setting a new peak of the duck curve, like the infamous duck curve, which I'm not sure I'll get a chance to cover, but basically with like high solar penetration, we have a very dip in rooftop solar. We have a dip in demand, especially in California during the day, but suddenly after the sun sets, that's also the time people come back home, turn on their appliances, so demand goes whoosh and the generation goes down. So it experiences a super peak at the evening. So our observation is, if we don't employ any charging strategies, that's going to exacerbate the peak of the existing duck curve. But with managing the charging, like incentivizing the EV user, hey, if you charge at night, you'll get some incentive, then you can prevent that. So yeah, that was kind of the primary observation from the study. Some other analysis we did, like, okay, so the 2028 numbers, it doesn't break, but where does it really break? So yeah, these are the numbers we came up with. So it's like 30 to 37 million light duty vehicles where it starts to break, like when you'll have unserved load. But with managed charging, if you allow, like, hey, just charge at the night and as late as possible and charge it super slow, then we could even host like way more EVs. And we also observed some of the transmission congestion at those points, and we identified the transmission congestion problems as well. So that summarizes our second project. I will skip the third project, which I was not sure I'll have time to cover anyway. But just to give a flavor, it started with a personal story of me owning a EV. So as you remember, I told we are in this Eastern Washington rural town, and I purchased this used EV in Seattle, and it crosses a mountain pass, like it's a really high mountain pass. And it just has 100 miles of range, whereas the distance is about, I forgot, 200. So basically with these mountaineers, and when we start, the range anxiety kicks in, we stop and stop and stop. But when we come here finally, no charging station, like no fast charging station. So we just plug it in at one of the Chevy car dealer shop, and wait the whole night and sleep in our car and go to office right straight from my trip. So this really brings to our next interesting topic, is that we are working extensively on where to place the chargers. And it's also a grid question, because if you place it randomly, it can further stress the grid. So, and also, but like when you place it, another interesting thing is like when and where you charge it. Like, for example, a fleet of electric buses can really save by charging at the right time. How? In two ways. Like, for example, most utilities use time of use charging, and they also penalize if you charge during the peak hours, like really heavily. So by knowing all those things, we can save a lot of cost. And another thing where we can save is that we can analyze the circuitry of the underlying, the city, and then see like what's the best place to place the chargers, because then you can defer any cost to upgrade the infrastructure. For example, you can replace the transformer maybe a little later and stuff. So these are the things we are working on, and currently we're working on a real transit operator in Chattanooga. And yeah, it's a project funded by Department of Energy's Vehicle Technologies Office. So where we kind of do a collaborative optimization between the transit operator and energy utility. Yeah, and I'll probably skip those, but I think I touched upon them fairly already. So yeah, that's kind of the end of the like super high level overview of what we did. And I know it's a lot of material. So here's just a little recap. Like, if you go home and forget, or if you're already home, but anyway, if you forget everything, like what are the bottom line you should remember? And just a quick recap, like in the introduction, what we learned is that clean energy transition is a major shift forward. There's no denying that. And electric grid is kind of the class in the transition. And EVs are also a major player, because you remember the transportation end use load is going to be significant in 2050 scenario. The second thing we learned in grid primer is like, what's the electric grid and what are the challenges due to this transition, through revising some key concepts. And for the specific studies, for the balancing the grid related study, we learned like how to balance the grid under high renewable, right? Second thing we learned is that like in the EV impact study, like how to study the impact of the grid to host a bunch of EVs, like what do you look at and what are our observations. And the third one we looked at for the bus charging, not so, I mean, we didn't get the time to cover, but like we would know otherwise is fair, and how to schedule charging to save cost and reduce the grid stress. So this really concludes my talk. We had a little video, but I'll probably skip that, because I want to allocate more time for some questions rather. But if you don't have any question, we can later play the video. But at this point, I'll want to open it for question. And I want to finish by saying that we don't have to remember everything what I said, but I hope it provides some food for thought, or spark your curiosity, since a lot of you are at the start of your career, start of your higher education. So if sparks your curiosity, maybe you can, always feel free to reach me, and always like you can explore on your own as well. So hope this was useful, and please ask me any questions. And it can also be about like PNNL, like as an electrical engineer, anything.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Ghosal. Really appreciated hearing you speak today. And I think I speak for everyone here when I say that it was a very interesting presentation, and I'm sure there are some questions. I already have a couple in the chat. Let me just get through these. Everyone else, you can hold your questions until I read these first two and we get the responses, then you can unmute your mics. Okay, so there was the question that came up about light duty vehicles. So are light duty vehicles considered consumer passenger vehicles in your definition?
Yes, yeah, that's what a majority of them are. I believe there could be some other, like, commercial fleets of taxis as well, but I'm not sure how much they are in the 2050 scenario. But we consider everything light duty vehicle, and most of them are like consumer passenger vehicles.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the definition can vary somewhat depending on who's using it and what the projection is. Thank you for the clarification. So one more question. Are consumer natural gas EV chargers on the market yet?
I am not aware of what that is though. Like, so you're talking about EVs, but those are like EV chargers, but those are smaller units with inbuilt generator. Is that it? I probably not quite sure.
So
About
the
that.
clarification was to be in my garage. So.
Oh, you mean from my study when I told that the additional EV load needs to be probably served by natural gas, right? If I assume.
That's correct.
Okay, if that's it, then that's a very good question, and I'll be super happy to clarify it. Okay, sorry for not finding any more elegant way of going back. Okay, I'll probably just take the elegant route. Yeah, remember the generating units like could be like anywhere far. Like when I say like to serve the EV charge, we had to deploy additional natural gas. It can be anywhere else. Like it can be sitting somewhere totally different, but when we ran our like re-optimize, redispatch, we figured out, okay, for this incremental load change, we had to deploy more natural gas. So that's how it works. And to answer your question, like if you can have a like really small natural gas unit at your home, I don't think the technology is yet, or if it's feasible or not. But honestly, there are like a lot of other technologies like solar powered chargers, and then you have a battery and solar power and a lot of other things. So that kind of like technologies are there that you can generate your own electricity and charge your car as well. But natural gas, I don't think we're there yet. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
So I actually know someone who kind of has a homebrew arrangement for that kind of thing, but I also am not really aware of any commercial offerings at this point. Just because I'm not aware of it doesn't mean it's not out there, though.
Exactly. And maybe it's viable, yeah, and maybe it's already there. So, yeah.
All right, everyone else, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and unmute your mics. Hopefully we don't have too many collisions here. I don't want to read everything from the chat if I don't have to.
I have one quick question.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're able to prove that electric vehicles can have a positive impact on the future of our Earth, does that mean that we should expect prices for electric vehicles to go up or go down for consumers to purchase in the future?
So that's a great question. And honestly, I'm like, that's kind of an uncharted territory for me, like price of the vehicles. But that's a great question though. Like, first of all, if we can prove electricity, like EVs are good for our earth, like it all depends on experimental design, but there are like a lot of life cycle analysis from like, cradle to grave kind of studies when the impact is analyzed. And for a like renewable heavy future, that's going to be like cleaner than what we have today. So that's kind of been well researched, and consensus has been reached. If that answers part of your question, the second question answer, though, if it's going to be cheaper or not, I don't know. I don't know how the economics of car and other things works. If the government involved, incentives, I really don't know. Honestly, it's not my expertise.
Okay, no, you did answer. You did answer my question. So thank you.
Sure. And one thing though, like with more electric, like renewable heavy future, the electricity is going to get cheaper because you don't need a fuel for running a solar plant or a wind farm. So it's so the cost of owning an EV is definitely going to go down. Like if I share my like for example, in Pacific Northwest, we have like very like lot of renewable. Like last year we had over 90% renewable. So yeah, if you look at it, this was my like monthly summary from one of the months from ChargePoint. So I ran distance added. So basically I could run like 455 miles using $8, and that's, I think, is already a bargain.
Yeah, that's actually crazy.
Mm-hmm. Although I should mention that in our like office, we may have some subsidized rate as well. But I think this month I usually charge mostly at home, so doesn't matter. Yeah.
Okay, Brandon, you can go ahead and talk. I see your hands up.
Hi, I'm just wondering if you've thought or have done any research into, there is going to be a storage issue, and if we're really pushing EVs, using them when there's a peak demand, if 10% of all of the electric cars plugged in could feed into the grid during a peak demand, I mean, would consumers be willing to sacrifice 10% of their range to stabilize the grid? I guess, I don't know, that's kind of a larger question.
Yes, you're talking about using also EVs as a kind of demand response and provide kind of grid service to store the electricity. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, right around that concept.
Yes, that's a very interesting topic, and we could have a dedicated session just for that, like demand response and EVs providing grid service. That's a like real possibility, and PNL has a lot of research in that. It's called transactive energy and other things. That's not my expertise, but there's like whole economics and whole like control systems research questions around that, and some of it is are like demonstrated, and also I don't think it's a like future, a distant future anymore. That's a possibility, and that's going to happen, at least partially, I'm sure. But I'm not an expert, so I cannot talk about the math and everything behind it, but you're right. Yeah, that's a possibility, and it's in the horizon.
Cool, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, are there any other questions from the audience? Okay, so I guess we are done at this point. Dr. Ghosal, I believe you said that it's okay if people want to ask questions later, they're free to contact you.
That's right, yes.
So
Yeah, here is my email ID, and yeah, you can also get in touch in LinkedIn. So feel free.
okay, so thank you, everyone. Everyone have a good rest of your day. Let us know if you have any questions or concerns on anything. We'll get the recording of this session posted soon. I'll try to edit out the section where the internet dropped. Okay. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you so much. It was really a pleasure. Yeah, thank you.